Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just a little update here. We're going to do some housekeeping. Just chats have been disabled to the entire group. You can chat the host and we'll get to your questions at the end of the presentation. Or if you have a question about the material that's currently being presented, please raise your hand and we will address it then. After the presentation, a survey will be sent out and your feedback is greatly appreciated. For our agenda today, we're going to talk about student employees versus staff employees, student pay policy. Then we'll go into where to start, and we'll hear from the Career Center with Handshake, and types of student employees. We'll hear from the Grad College and Financial Aid about work study, and then we'll talk about some background checks, I-9s, and some various resources available to you as well. To start us off, we're going to talk about what a student employee is. Student employees are students of the university who are enrolled in 6 credits or more as an undergrad, 5 credits or more as a graduate student, or in the final semester of a degree program and registered for all classes required for that program. Students must regularly attend class, and they must be a current student registered for a future semester or a newer returning student that has current admission status for the next semester. Types of student positions, we're going to talk about that on the next slide here. So we have regular student employees, again, 6 undergrad, 5 graduate. They can work no more than 29 hours per week. Work study funded, which we'll go into more later on, can work no more than 20. So 2 jobs means 20 hours of work study, 1 job in 9 hours in a non-work study. All student employees, with the exception of graduate students, graduate assistantships, and student adjuncts are hired through the candidate hire form in PeopleSoft or Campus Solutions. Graduate assistants are students who are in an assistantship that's offered by different departments across campus, and it's managed by the Graduate College. We'll hear more about them later from Bailey. Full-time positions are 20 hours per week and 10 hours for part-time. These are hired through Bronco Hub, and either Bronco Hub or an upload that is submitted to the Grad College. Any employee who's in an active assistantship must have Graduate College approval to work a secondary position. Then we have student adjuncts. Again, 6 credits for undergrad, 5 for graduate, and they're going to be teaching a course. They are going to be a student person type, whereas a regular adjunct is going to be a faculty person type. They do follow the same rules as the adjuncts, where they can teach no more than 11 credits per semester, but they still have to follow that hours per week. When you convert those credits to hours, they still can work no more than 29 hours per week. These will be hired with either a letter of appointment upload spreadsheet or directly into Bronco Hub with a manager self-service action. So let's start first with, do you know if you're hiring a student or a staff employee? So we'll ask, are they enrolled? Yes, we're going to go down and continue to our workflow, and then we're going to no, then you're just going to hire them as a staff employee. If they are they enrolled in 6 credits as an undergrad or 5 as a graduate? If they are not, we're going to hire them as a staff employee. If they are, we'll go ahead and hire them using the candidate hire form. Things to consider when you're going to hire a student employee is, are they currently working in another area on campus? How many hours are they working in each of those jobs that they have on campus? Are they in a current graduate assistantship? Are they graduating soon? And do they have a work study award? All of these things can impact how you hire them or the rules that are going to govern their employment. I'm going to turn it over to the Career Center to talk to us about Handshake.
Great, thanks. My name's 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀𝘀, and I am with the Career Services and Employer Relations. Just wanted to walk you all through posting on campus jobs and kind of getting that start to acquiring candidates. If you can switch to the next slide. So our Boise State uses Handshake as our job posting platform, and other areas that it offers as well. But we do strongly encourage you to post all of your campus jobs here on Handshake. Students are used to going here to look for full-time jobs, internships, and campus jobs. So it's kind of their one-stop shop for even volunteer opportunities or work study as well. So what you can do with Handshake is you can post the student jobs. You can review all of those applications for your jobs on Handshake, and you can set any desired qualifications you want for your jobs through Handshake, as well as what you would like for application materials to come in: resumes, cover letters, work writing samples, other portfolios that you may need. You can set that criteria based on majors and degrees, years in college and such. And then in Handshake, you can manage all of your applicants by reviewing their profiles. Also, and I'll show you, you can register for events on Handshake. And we do offer a part-time and summer job fair on April 10th. So that'll be open sometime in the middle of the semester if you are interested in having a table out on in campus to promote any jobs you have coming up. How to start to get into Handshake. If you are a new user, you'll need to create an account. Do reach out to us. Most departments already have an account on Handshake, so it would just be making sure that you are associating yourself with that department's Handshake account, and then you can post jobs and go through the whole process. We do have staff that approves jobs each day, but if you don't see it being approved in a quick manner, please do just reach out to us and we can go and take a look and get that approved so students can start applying. And then next, if I can share over, I will do a demonstration of Handshake. When you log into Handshake, you will come to the home page of the platform, and you have options on your left-hand bar, and then also some quick options here in the middle. So what you'll do is select Post a Job, and just start populating all of the information for the position that you have. I'll just kind of go through part of it and do a sample, but we will create a job for a student assistant. And then select the on-campus student employment. There is the other button that populates volunteer, graduate school, or whatnot, but we'll select on-campus student employment. If this position is a work study program only position, then you'll want to select that. If you can hire both work study students or non-work study students, do not select it because it'll actually exclude any students that don't have their work study approvals. So for this case, we are going to do work study program. I'll select that. And then just to kind of help the students out when they are looking for positions, go ahead and type in work study only into the job title. And that way it kind of pings students at their first view as well. Then you'll be able to enter in your job description, or you can copy and paste from another document that you have. If you have any past positions in there, you can select an old position, and I'm going to do that here just for ease. And it pre-populates or auto-populates the entire description. One thing to note, if you need any help with creating the job descriptions, there's this nice little link, and then I also at the end of the presentation have a link to Career Services there to help you to create your job description. Just something to kind of start. Good little framework is having a description about your organization, your department, the requirements of the position, or responsibilities and duties of the position, so what the student is expected to do. and then the requirements and skills that are necessary for that position, and then any other benefits that they would get out of working for you. And then it does help to have information. You'll get to select this again later on, but just to place into that job description information on expected hours, or if it's hybrid or in office, or different things like that will be helpful for those students. And we'll hit continue on for that. They will be on site, and then you'll just select Boise, Idaho, just the state and city and state, and then continue. And then you can select that hybrid button too if you offer it both. We'll select part-time for this, and then you do not need to list hours if it varies, but if you do know, we'll put in the number of hours, and you can select per day, per week. So the expectation is already there for the students to review, and then that it is a temporary position. So I'll just select a start date for in the future. We'll go to the end of the semester. Oops. And then continue on with that. For the estimated pay, we do highly recommend putting the pay in job descriptions for students. You can opt out of that by selecting this don't show pay, but when you do, it'll just, again, ask for confirmation that you're not going to show that pay. There is a range option, so you don't necessarily need to put the $10 or $15 an hour. You can select a range for that. And then if it is unpaid or an exact amount, you have those options there as well. Any additional compensation, benefits, perks that they get, go ahead and add those here. And then we'll just go to continue. This job role group just kind of helps students when they are looking for positions to sort and scan jobs. It auto-populated the office administrative support workers based on my job description and title. But as you can see, there's quite a few you can choose from, and add on as many, or up to 3, sorry. But you also don't need to list this if you want to leave it open. Oh, maybe it does make me. All right, and then you can also select candidate qualifications. If you're looking for juniors, seniors, or certain school year, these are all optional. The graduation date, if you're looking for someone to graduate soon or will be in school for quite a while, and then the majors as well. So if you see majors listed with a number, it actually auto-populates several majors that will apply to art and design, or if you're just looking for one at a time, you can select that. So computer science will bring in 10 different majors, or you can just select the computer science. And then you'll continue on. Make sure to only select Boise State University. Since it is a campus position, you'll need to put the Boise State in there. And then the application date. So as soon as you would like to receive applications, we'll start tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and close in 2 weeks. At the end of the day. And then the number of hires. So if you do have any roles in your department that you'll maybe shift through students, you can select 2 positions if it's the same exact role. You do want the candidates to submit applications on Handshake, and then I'll show you how you'll review those. And then Handshake profile is automatically selected for documents you'll receive. But do definitely list a resume. Not all students have completed Handshake profiles. It's very generic to just their major or a few jobs. So you'll definitely want to have the resume for a more thorough information on the students. But then you can also select other. So if you have an actual application form, you can send a link or provide an email or other directions for application materials. If you're not the only one going to be doing the hiring, or if you were just the one to set up the position and someone else will do the hiring, you can add additional hiring team members. So at this button here, we'll select another team member to review resumes. So you can select for either one of the format that you want to have resumes. So you can either just get a summary of the email applications once that application period closes. You can get, based on your qualifications, just a notification on only those candidates that actually meet those set requirements that you set, or send an email each time the candidate applies. So I will just select at the very end. I'll give my colleague an email every time. And then you'll do one last check. Just review everything. You can expand, review, make sure all of the information is complete. And then what you'll do is post the job. Handshake does not auto-save this job description. So if you get out or back out, you will lose your information. So just make sure to hit save as draft if you're not ready to publish. And then you'll want to post job once it's ready to go live or when you're all complete. And then I'm gonna X out and then we'll go to our jobs. So once you've posted your job, you'll see it here. I went to the left-hand bar here and clicked on jobs. I don't have any current jobs, so yours would show up as active. I'm gonna go to a closed position so I can show you how to review them. So this is what you'll see, your jobs that are active, and then you'll just select, the position. And then the tab that shows applicants will show you all the applicants that have applied. And you can either download all the applicant material and data, or just look at it one at a time, PDF of their resume or application materials. And then if something you can do as well is do make sure as you go through and either interview, review these candidates to make sure to select the status, reviewed or pending. They'll come in as pending, but reviewed, and then make sure to select hired or declined, as students do apply for a lot of different positions on campus. And so it helps them to understand what positions have already been filled or if there's opportunities still at those departments. And that will be all. So if I can have you go back to the PowerPoint.
Really quick, Kelly, we did have a question come through for you. Justin wanted to know is there a way to add our own application questions so we can ask them to include other information? Or is there a way we can disable their ability to apply directly on Handshake and only go to our Google Forms application?
And go to a separate application area?
I believe that's what he's asking.
Okay. There is, so let me go back and I'll share my screen again. On here, you can select an external website for them to apply on. Oops. And that was a box where you saw the handshake. Of course, it's at the very end. Right here. So where you see on Handshake, or you can select on a separate website. So
So,
then
Kelly-
that would, Mhm.
Oh, sorry. I was going to ask. So then that would prevent them from being able to like hit submit on the ad or like attach documents and hit submit on the ad or anything like that, right?
Right. So they will still show in Handshake that they've applied to your external job. So you'll actually still see that the student listing on that applicant field, but their resumes or whatever you directed them to will go to whatever that external site is.
Okay. But aside from that, there's no other ways that we can modify. Like if we did want to keep it just on Handshake, we couldn't modify what the fields ask for. Like, you know, I know you said they have major, like their profiles they set up, but maybe they changed majors. So their profile's invalid now. So like if I wanted to add a question like, what's your major? Or maybe that one's already built in there. But I guess I'm wondering, are there other fields that I can require them to fill out before they actually hit submit
Yeah.
when they're applying via Handshake?
Right. If you don't see, right, like the major and the GPA and those things, and you have other things, my suggestion here would to be put in this other field, so additional required, and potentially make like a separate Google form or some other thing where you can put the link to that. And then that might have the additional questions that you do have. So you can kind of filter through that. But
Okay.
otherwise, editing or adding anything within Handshake, it's all set. It's all preset from Handshake.
Gotcha. So yeah, if I included that field, I mean, I would still need them to click on it and then fill it out. But like technically Handshake wouldn't know if they actually did that or not. So it'd still let them like submit the application, right?
Right. They could still apply.
Gotcha. Okay. And sorry, I had just one more follow-up question. I know you mentioned in like after the students have applied, if you mark it as hired or not hired or whatever, that indicates to them if there's still availability in that position. For one of the roles that I post on there, we just keep it open and available all the time. And we're like just constantly hiring students for that. So
Yeah.
if I'm not changing that status for any of our applicants and we're communicating with them via email to let them know that, then to the rest of the students that have not yet applied, when they see our job ad on Handshake, it still appears to them as if that position is still open and available, right?
Right. Yeah. As long as your application end date is out in the future, you could be declining students as you go. And if you kind of leave a pool of students, one thing we just ask, because we understand like you have some students, you don't want to close them out as positions may become available. Just give like a decent time frame, like, okay, 2 months since or a month since the students applied, let me follow up and let them know. So that way it's not a whole entire semester by the time you might reach back. So just kind of keeping that communication time frame based on what fits for how you hire in your roles.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
And then before you exit out, I do have another question. Danya asked, to choose a hiring team member in Handshake, does my colleague have to already have a Handshake account, or will they be invited to set one up? Same question about, sorry, I'll let you answer that first.
Okay, so yes, for your hiring, these are folks that are on my team. So I actually only get to see the folks within my career center. So if you don't already have somebody else set up that way, you'll invite the team member, and that's where you can populate their Boise State information. They'll get an email from Handshake to then join and create. So then not until they've actually accepted and created that Handshake profile, you won't be able to add them until they've gone through their steps.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then they had kind of a follow-up question about current student employees, that they often include my current student employees in my search for new student employees, either as a new team member or as a replacement of the current one, so that they can cross-train. So I think their question, if I'm understanding it correct, is if you can also add student employees as a hiring team member.
The student, if they have a non-student email address, so if they are hired as with the access to Handshake, which most likely they are not. So what I would just do in that manner is you're able to download those students, and so you could send them that information just by email and have them take a look at it.
What I can say is that any student employee who is hired through Bronco Hub and is paid through Boise State, they are automatically set up with an employee email. So
Okay.
as long as you're using that employee email as well, I do believe that they could
Okay.
sign in through Handshake.
Yeah, as long as they have an employee email, then they can set up themselves like everybody else. And then here's if you didn't want it, you can download this PDF and then send that to anybody else anyone on your team, if they don't want to set up a Handshake account, can review that way and kind of meet with you.
And then I did get one more question that was just kind of general about if slides will be sent after this presentation, and I do want to confirm that we will send out that slide deck following this training. So that's
And then Justin, did you have another question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So on this end here where you can download their materials, do you know how long they're kept there? I've run into this a few times where like a student applied, once 3 months ago and, sort of stopped communicating with us. So we took them out of the pool and then applied again. Or, emailed us 3 months later saying, hey, I'd like to apply actually. And so I'm trying to get their materials again without having to make them apply again. And then it'll say, oh, this link is expired. Contact us to get that data. And I've done that before, but I guess I just don't know what the time frame for application materials being kept in the ad looks like in terms of before they expire and I can't download them from here anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely it does. I don't have that answer, but I'm writing it down here and then I can provide that to you. So
awesome. Thank you.
Sure. All right, and then if no other questions on the Handshake, I do have just one more slide. Cece, if you want to share, Rachel. All right, and then just here's some links. So these are on that presentation that will be sent out. This is specific directions. Again, not a video, but it walks you through how to post a position on Handshake, a link for job description tips, and then the student employment guidelines for supervisors. And then one other thing, just if this QR code and the bottom are support for students as well. So you can get to career support for students. So if you even want to put it in your job description, you can put this link, but it's a resume assistance and it just gives them tips. But the QR code also brings them to our career services site for interviewing tips and resume tips and networking and such. So those are things if you want to help your students out as well. And that is everything that I have.
Okay, I think I'm up next for work study. Thank you for that. My name is Dominique. I'm a business analyst here in the financial aid office, and one of my main projects is work study. So since we're going to share the slide deck out, I'm going to try my best not to just read everything on these and just give you as much of a brief overview as I can. At the end, we do provide our dedicated email, faworkstudy@boisestate.edu, for any questions that do come up. So for those of you who are not quite familiar with work study or still have questions, don't fully understand what it's about, brief overview. Work study is a financial aid award that allows students to work on campus, and then they earn a paycheck to pay toward a portion of their cost of attendance. What's different from work study and other financial aid is that it never pays directly to the student account. So it doesn't get applied the same way at the beginning of the term, where tuition and fees are due, financial aid gets released and dispersed, and so then their fees get paid and they potentially get a refund as well. Work study instead is the same as every other position on campus. They have to work, submit a timesheet, earn their paycheck every 2 weeks, just like the rest of us. It is a need-based award. So as such, the regulations, both from federal and the state of Idaho, say that they need to have a FAFSA on file. They need to have half-time enrollment or greater, which Cece actually already kind of touched on, 6 credits for undergraduates and 5 for graduates. They need to remain eligible for Title IV funding, so no satisfactory academic progress holds and no incomplete verification if they did get selected for verification in the federal processes. And then it's up to the student to find a job and apply for it and get hired. note, if you already have students who you've hired and are paying them through your department funding, if they become eligible for work study, we don't know who those students are. So they're not automatically getting rolled into work study positions. It's up to you and the student to communicate, know who has their awards, and get them hired into that separate position to be able to be paid from that award. We don't put any regulation on how much a student can earn at any time throughout the year. If they standard award is $5,000. So if they have their $5,000 award, they could earn it all in fall if they're graduating at the end of fall, or maybe they don't start enrollment until spring, they could earn it all in spring. They can split it half and half, a third, 2/3. It's really up to you and the student and whatever the schedule looks like and works out best for you. But the award amount, the $5,000, is the maximum amount that they're allowed to earn. As they reach those limits, we're reviewing students typically around 80%. If they're 80% earning, we are automatically reviewing their account to see if they have any more unmet need and room for us to increase. To my knowledge, since we've been doing those automatic reviews, we have not denied anybody who was eligible. If they had extra room in their unmet need formula and they were working actively and earning those dollars, then we were increasing their award. And then the benefit to you is that your department is now not paying for that student position. You get the student employee, but your department doesn't have to pay for it. It gets paid from their award. So unless the student goes over their award or becomes ineligible, that's a benefit for you guys. Allocations for our entire institution, both state and federal, are based off of the earnings that we had the previous year. So it's really important as the supervisor also to make sure that you're making every effort to maximize those earnings and getting them on the schedule to earn the full $5,000 as much as possible. Because if we don't spend our entire allocation, we're not going to get as much the following year. If we do spend our whole allocation, it's very likely that we will get an increase. Not guaranteed, but likely. And so we're always looking at that, trying to maximize the amount that we are spending for this program. Small note on the federal allocation, 7% of our allocation needs to be paid into community service jobs. So if we're asking you, and that's why it's on the hire form, is this a community service position? We're just trying to fill that requirement. If we don't meet that requirement, this is the last year of our pandemic waiver where we don't have to meet it. But if we don't meet the 7% requirement in following years, then we could lose federal work study funding. So that's why we're asking those questions, just trying to identify those positions and fill them.
Hey, Dominique, before you head on, we do have a couple of questions that have already come through. Someone asked, or Kenzie asked, if there are any disadvantage to be seeking both work study and non-work study eligible students as an employer?
No, there's not. And if your department is able to pay for a student position and you don't necessarily have to have work study funds, then it's, I think it's a benefit for you to seek both because it expands the pool of applicants that you're going to get if you're not identifying it specifically as a work study position, if your department is able to pay for it. So I don't see any disadvantage to that.
Another question, if a student is awarded a work study grant, does that affect other financial aid that they might be granted or affect eligibility for financial aid?
Because it's a need-based award, they need to have room in their cost of attendance minus any other awards that they've been granted. Where it does come into play, it's one of the last need-based awards that gets offered to a student. Grants are always going to come first because grants are automatic and the student doesn't have to pay them back. We allow students the option to accept loans before they accept their work study because they don't have to wait for that paycheck. So a loan will get priority, but if the student declines that loan, and the student can always provide us the permission to reduce the amount of the loan that they have accepted in order to make room for work study, and that's a benefit to them because they don't have to pay it back. You know, it's up to the student on that end. What has happened and could happen, it is one small risk that you take is if a student has their financial aid seemingly set and they've got their work study, it's been offered, and you hire them into a position. And then later in the year, maybe they get a late scholarship, something like that. Work study is one of the ones that they're going to look at decreasing right away because, again, it's not paid up front. So it could be reduced if they get a late award and it lowers their financial needs based on their cost of attendance. It's case by case basis, though.
Thank you. Next question, is there a standard hourly wage for work study?
No, it's based on the position. So it just needs to be in line with and consistent with the position that you're hiring. So if it's a clerical position, it just needs to be consistent with other clerical positions on campus. And as long as it's not outrageously more than what other clerical positions pay, there's no strict limit on that.
We have had a couple more come through. Danya wanted to know if you could give any examples of community service jobs on campus.
There's not too many on campus. We've been working with service learning to try to identify those as much as possible. We've had a few at the library that we have identified as potential. Tutoring is one that we're looking at as well. If there are any tutoring or student success coaches, things like that. One stipulation that the federal government puts on it in the FSA handbook is that it needs to be available to the public at large. So it cannot be whatever service they're performing cannot be only for the benefit of Boise State students and employees. So something like the Children's Learning Center is not eligible for that because it's only right now open to employees and students. We don't, if they were to enroll a child who was from the public, then that's when we would start to look at that.
Awesome. And then Justin had a question that he was going to ask, but I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So I just had a question about like what the different types of awards are for work study. I know on the time cards I've seen like in terms of the funding source that's paid out for that labor, like Idaho work study and then federal work study. And I was curious if you could go over some of the differences between the two, and if there is usually variance in one or the other, or if it's like if they get the Idaho work study, they're getting 4,000, and if they get the federal one, they're getting 5. There's usually not any variance. You know what I mean? Kind of curious about like the minimums and maximums for each of those awards too.
There really is no difference other than who it's getting paid from. We don't necessarily. There's no difference between what a student gets based on which award they get. It's really, we offer Idaho to residents so that we can fill the award and we can use our entire allocation because they have to go to Idaho residents. And then any non-resident students any non-residents have to get federal work study. It really just depends on how much room we have in either allocation of our overall funding pool. Otherwise, there's no difference.
Okay, and then so for the most part, it seems like most of those awards, like almost the standard average, most common work study student that we could see come our way is pretty much always going to have an award of like $5,000. It sounds like that's like pretty standard.
5,000 is the standard award that we offer unless they don't have a full 5,000 in need. There are few instances where we will go as low as 1,500, but we try not to go lower than that. Because it is need-based, and so we're trying to get the students with the most need that funding. But 5,000 is the standard, unless they don't have that much need left in their cost of attendance formula. And then I've seen it go all the way up to 8,000 for the students who are actively working and earning those funds. So, but again, those increases are something that we are assessing as they're earning.
Okay. And then, sorry, one more quick follow-up question. If a student gets work study like in fall and then like complete withdrawals in mid-fall, or even just doesn't come back for the spring, or, maybe doesn't enroll in the first part of spring, but then enrolls in like a second 7-week class or something like that, whenever they do come back, as long as it's within the same academic year, do they automatically get their aid back, or do they have to like reapply on the FAFSA and things like that?
They don't have to reapply on the FAFSA, but they could have had their work study award canceled. So that's going to be a case-by-case basis. Any periods where they are not enrolled at least half time, if they were previously hired and they continue to submit hours, those hours are going to be charged back to your department because we will pay the payroll on them. The hours get submitted, but then as that payroll comes through to us on our reports, it'll get charged back to your department if we determine that they were not enrolled half-time.
Okay, and then do you guys usually tell the departments like if an award was canceled for a student or something, or is that
Yes.
something? Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
thank you.
and we can get to the rest of that too. So let's try to pause on questions at this point and try to get through the rest of it, and hopefully that'll answer the majority of the questions that continue to come up if they do. Okay. I think we're ready for the next one. Okay, so a quick breakdown of responsibilities. Pretty much on the financial aid side, our office, what we're responsible for is all of the award maintenance. So we're going to be responsible for offering the award, helping walk the students through accepting it if they need to. And then if there's any award fluctuations, we will communicate out those kinds of things that come up to the student and supervisors as well if the student has been hired. Monitoring eligibility, making sure that they're maintaining that throughout the year and sending out communications. And then because that award is paid by our office, all of the accounting and payroll portions of it will be made through our office, and any adjustments have to come through with approval by our accountant. On your end, the departments who are hiring the work study students, you're responsible for hiring and separating the job assignments every year. At the end of every year, we require that every single work study job assignment is separated and terminated and then rehired for the next year, even if it's the same position. That way we keep a 1-to-1 ratio. This job was 100% hired for this award year and this award that was given. And then the next award year is a whole separate job assignment. Any changes after you hire a student employee, you can submit changes, but they will not be approved until they have been run by our office first. So any payroll, pay rate changes, end date extensions, or costing changes sometimes try to come through. HR is going to reach out to our office and ask us to approve those before they can push through. And then another piece of responsibility, making sure that the students are not working during class time. You're planning for 100% award utilization, trying to get them on the schedule to make sure they're earning that full $5,000. And as you're approving their timesheets, ensuring that the student doesn't go over their award amount. Keep in mind that we have I'm looking at the payroll calendar, we've got the date that payroll is that you submit it, and then there's processing time. And it's about a 2-week gap until payroll is actually processed and it's paid, and we don't have those reports right away. So there could be up to a 2-week gap where we don't have the earnings from the previous pay period. And if they are continuing to work and they've gone over their award in that previous pay period, there could be a little bit of overlap there. So it's really beneficial for you to track. You know how much awards they have when you hire them. It's right there on the screen. You know what their pay rate is. If you're keeping track of how many hours they've submitted and kind of following along with how much they've earned, then that's really beneficial on your part as well. We do our best to try to reach out to you, let you know when we see that they're reaching their maximums, they're 80% or higher. But if you're tracking on your end as well, then you're ahead of the game because we don't have that report for sometimes up to 2 weeks. At the bottom of this slide, before we move on, there's a real big resource, work study resource site. Use it. Hopefully it helps answer a lot of questions and it's available to anybody. Real quick visual of years. And the reason this is important is because it doesn't align fully with one or the other. We always start work study on July 1st. So students can start working for the upcoming year as long as they are enrolled at least half-time for fall. If we show that they're enrolled at least half-time for fall already, then they can start working on July 1 before the school year starts. At the end of each term, students who are not continuing on for the next term, so either they are not enrolled at least half-time or they're graduating, the last day for them to work is the last day of finals week. So for fall, that was December 15th. And for spring, it's going to be May 3rd. So if they're graduating or not continuing on, at least half-time or greater, then the last day to work is the last day of final. And if any hours do get submitted, again, those are the situations where we will communicate with you. We'll let you know, hey, we see the hours were submitted. We're going to need to switch these back to your department because the student was not eligible. All students currently are set to end on May 3rd. You'll have noticed that the hiring form does not allow you to extend beyond that this year. And that's a new thing that we're doing where at the beginning of April, we are going to assess all students who are currently working in our office, and we are going to find the students who are half-time or greater with enrollment for summer and still have room left in their award, and we will submit those end date extensions for any students who are eligible to work the first few weeks of summer. That way we'll make sure, because we've had a lot of overlap in previous years where we've allowed you to select that and then the student ends up not enrolling for summer, things like that. And so we want to avoid those chargebacks if we can. So we're going to find the students who are eligible and we will extend those dates into summer for you. The last day for the students who are eligible to work during the first half of summer is the end of the fiscal year. That way we have a clean break for reporting purposes. End of the fiscal year, we can close out the year, close out our 8-year reports and get ready for the next year. And then at the very bottom, you can see how it doesn't fully align with the academic or the typical award year because those normally go August to August. But because of that fiscal year and the HR piece of it, we align more with the fiscal year than we do the 8-year. Cece's going to walk you through hiring a student employee. I'm going to touch on a few things that are just a little bit different. The very first question that gets asked is what hire type is it? Work study or non-work study? When you select work study, what's going to happen? The system is going to check for eligibility at that time. Do they have an accepted award? Are they half-time or greater, Title IV eligible? And are those hire dates that you're selecting between July 1st and the last day of spring final? And then after it checks for eligibility, as long as they're eligible, you get into the hire form. One thing that we are requesting that is specific for work study, underneath the job description, there's a small field called specific job title. Put a WS at the beginning of it. We have found that is very beneficial. And until we get the hire form updated to automatically include it for you, it's a visual that gets transferred into HCM and Bronco Hub. So when they are filling out their timesheets and they select that job assignment number, they can visually see this is my work study job because you put that WS at the beginning of the job title. And we'll see a screenshot of that. So here's in the upper left is the first part when you select, is this a work study job? And so you fill in the student's ID, your date, and check that. Click on that check eligibility box, and it's going to check those pieces that I talked about. If they're eligible, you'll see that green message, student is eligible for a work study position. If they're not eligible, I found a couple examples where they weren't. In the upper right corner, those red messages tell you exactly what's going on. The student is not enrolled at least half-time, or they don't have an accepted work study award, it'll tell you. And then at the bottom, in that bottom box, that is the specific job title that's highlighted where you put the WS at the beginning of it. It's going to auto-populate that generic title that you choose above. So it'll actually say student clerical. I happen to type in the work study job title on this example, so you could change it to whatever you want, but the important part is just the WS for the visual. Further down the hire form, there are a few pieces that you will not see on the regular student hire form, and that's the community service questions, and then off campus. Again, it's not going to apply to the majority of students, but the reason that we're asking if it's a community service job is that 7% requirement that that we need to have for federal work study positions. So we need a way to identify those as well. You'll notice that you cannot update the funding source. The funding source for this job is going to be attached directly to the student's award. So this might answer a little bit of Justin's question. If the student was given a federal work study award, it's going to get a federal cost center funding stream. If they have an Idaho award, they're going to get an Idaho work cost center funding stream. And then that, when it gets fed into Bronco Hub, is going to tie into their time reporting code. So when they're submitting their timesheets, if it's a federal award, federal funding string, federal time reporting code, Idaho award, you get it. Below that, you will need to submit a backup funding source That is for informational purposes only. It doesn't get transferred into HCM. It never gets automatically used or applied. We use it as needed for manual adjustments, and we will always reach out to you before we ever make any adjustments if they are needed. Okay, couple FAQs. I'll let you guys read through those when you get the slide deck. The third one is one that I want to kind of touch on. If you have a student that you've identified that you would like to hire, but they do not have an award, what do you do? We do have a waitlist request form. It's online. Here's a link here as well. You can direct the student to it. It's first come, first served basis. We make initial awards at the beginning of the year. And then after that, we have an allocation. So we have to stay within our budgeted allocation from whatever the federal government or the state of Idaho gives us. So we do first come, first served basis. Right now, we're not currently offering new awards because we are actually over allocation on what we have offered. We don't fully expect to, although we hope to spend all of that, and have students earn, the students who have the awards earn that full amount. But we just have to see where the room is. So that wait list request, the sooner that they get on that list, the sooner they could potentially be offered an award if they don't have one already. We've already talked about the 20 hours per week. If you have a student working 29 hours per week, that's okay. 20 hours of them will be submitted on one timesheet for their work study position. 9 hours will be submitted on a second timesheet for a position that's paid by your department. We've talked about awards being increased, and then communications. We just kind of, we included this on here because there are some communications that we've been able to automate. I've been working really hard to improve our processes and the program overall. But right now it's really limited to just award notifications to students directly. Any communications that are going out to supervisors, business managers, whoever's on the hire form, is very manual still. We have to run a whole bunch of reports, analyze them, determine who needs to know what, and it's a very manual process. So we do appreciate your patience with that. We're doing the best that we can, but we're not quite there yet. There is a new federal reporting requirement that has helped expedite a project request that we do have in, where we're hoping to get the earnings from Bronco Hub back into PeopleSoft so that we can have the system help us analyze how close they are getting to their award and hopefully automate some more of those communications. And then I'm going to walk you through a couple tools real fast, but again, there's that work study email dedicated. If you have any questions, please email us. But if I can screen share, I will show you a couple tools that we have. Okay. So this first one is the work study resource site, that real big link at the bottom of the page. You'll see that there's a couple different pages in here, how to hire, what to do when they have more than one job, or maybe you have a job where it's paid by your department and a job that is paid through work study. And I just wanted to highlight here, this is what the timesheet looks like in Bronco Hub, and this business title shows up on that timesheet. You can see here where that WS appears. And so we have that visual for the student when they're submitting their timesheet. And then depending on their award, they're picking federal or Idaho for their time reporting code. So use this resource site. There's a lot of information in here. If your questions aren't answered, again, that dedicated email for our work study team is really useful. Within here, I think it's on this page, but there's a link in the slide deck as well. This work study supervisor planning tool. This is a Google spreadsheet that we have put together for you. And it's intended for you to use before you hire a work study student and throughout their job assignment. So it's locked down for editing. You cannot edit it directly. So you're going to want to come up to File and make a copy, and make a copy to your own drive. And then once you do that, you can fill in all of the fields that are highlighted bright yellow, and all of the calculations are made for you. So here's a pay period planner where you can put in estimated hours to try to maximize that award amount, but then actual hours as well. There's columns for that to manage it throughout the year. We don't ever worry about fringe benefits or anything, so it is a strict rate of pay times hours worked. How much have they earned toward their award? If you're trying to figure out how much to pay them or what to plan for how many hours you want them to work per week. We have it go both ways, weekly hours. So whatever their rate of pay is, average hours per pay period. Remember that there's 2 weeks per pay period. So it kind of gives you that estimation here. And you can start to see with the highlighted areas where they might maximize their award depending on their award amount. The standard is 5,000, so we're looking at the purple section typically. And then you just go the opposite way. Maybe you know that you've got 10 hours to work per week. So what kind of rate of pay are we looking at? Well, I've got 12 pay periods. Maybe that I'm able because it's a fall-only student. So, you know, it gives you a range here where you can see on the other side what a good rate of pay might be, as long as it falls in with other like positions. So clerical positions have a pay range that are typical, but HR can help guide you on those ranges as well. But this kind of is meant to help you plan out and maximize that award. The next one is, I hope you're all familiar with Boise State reporting. I was logged in. But on Boise State reporting, so to get there from Bronco Hub, you go to My Organization, and Boise State reporting is a tile there. From Boise State reporting, this is what the page should look like. In the middle, under Human Resources and Employee, there's a work study dashboard. And that's what that other page was. So when you click on that dashboard, it's going to give you a list. It's going to populate a report with a list of students who have work study awards. Grab my student ID here that I had selected earlier. You have to say search. You put the student ID in, and then you pull them over and say OK. And then continue. And what this report is going to give you is you can look up a student before you hire, and you can see if they have been offered an award. If they've been offered an award, they're going to show up without any information in the first few columns, but this award status is going to give you an O. And so you're going to see how much of an award do they have. After they've accepted it, it flips to an A. If they've been hired, and you can see the student example has 3 different job assignments, 2 of them are inactive, you can see that they've already been hired into a job assignment. It's important to note that if they do have more than 1 job assignment, that this full award amount, so the $4,000 on the student example, is split between all 3 jobs. So it's up to you, and if there is another supervisor involved, to communicate and collaborate and make sure that you're between the 2 of you, you're not going over that $4,000. So this is a resource that that we had built that is pulling in payroll earnings as well as award status to try to help you guys manage that as well. And those and the last one, where did my tab go? The last one, if you go into Google and you have 3 dots and you've got groups, My Google Groups, if you search for work study, supervisors and department managers, it is open to anybody with a Boise State email address. If you want to be a part of that, that is the mass email group that we use to send out notifications and let people know updates about the program. I will stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Dominique. We are at time. I think we're going to just keep going to still present all the information. So you're more than welcome to stay as we continue on. We're going to walk through how to hire a non-work study employee. So Dominique showed us the different fields that were different for work study versus non-work study. So we're going to sign into Campus Solutions from myboisestate.edu. And I've highlighted here what you'll select: Campus Solutions, PeopleSoft. And then you'll select the tile that states HR new ID and student hire. From here, you'll have a column on the left with different selections you can make, and you'll select hire new candidate. And from there, you'll click the drop-down box and select non-work study student for non-work study and work study for a work study student. Then you'll click next. Here, it gives you a lot of verbiage, a lot of instructions. If you take the time to go through them, they are very helpful. They have a lot of very helpful links to kind of get you started on your way to make sure that your student hire is successful. On the right hand side, you're going to see where you can enter the candidate ID. Then you'll enter the employment start date and the employment end date. And that's when you will get the message for whether they meet the minimum requirements for student employment, or if they don't meet it, the message will be in red and it'll say that the student does not meet minimum credit requirements. Here is where it'll list what other positions that candidate holds on campus. So a lot of times this is easily overlooked just because it's at the bottom. There is a big gap from that message to the listed other ones, but it is important to take a look at standard hours. You're going to want to make sure that the position that you're adding is going to keep that student below that 29 total. From there, once you hit next, it'll pull in the student ID and the name and the dates that you entered. From here, you're going to identify the type of work that the student's going to be doing. Student clerical, student academic, pick your generic classification. And then next, you're going to select the generic title. So it'll have the different drop-downs will be populated based on the type of work that you select. So if you select student clerical, it'll have student clerical 1, 2, and 3. Student academic, it'll have student academic assistant 1, 2, and 3. And then the duties is going to be populated based on the generic title that you submit. And then here is that specific job title here that Dominique was talking about. If it's a non-work study, you can enter whatever you want. You can change that student academic assistant 2 to Psych 101 assistant, and you can put a teacher's name if you want. But here's where you would enter that WS in the beginning to notate if it is a work study. Hourly range for the job is going to populate here. It's going to have the minimum, the recommended, the mid, and the max. If you're outside of that, you may want to go back and select a different student clerical position or student academic assistant to get that range that you are going to hire within. You'll enter your hourly wage and your estimated hours per week. And again, these hours per week, we want them to be as close to the actual hours they're going to work as possible, just in the event that they are working on another job on campus, or they are potentially going to be holding another job on campus. That way we can make sure we stay in compliance with that 29 hours per week. So next you'll enter your HR department ID, maybe different than your funding department ID. And then you'll enter your supervisor ID and the department manager ID. This section that I've circled with this blue box, it's for Bronco jobs is what we had prior to Handshake. So our developers are currently in the process of working to remove this section. So currently you would just hit no because we do not have a Bronco jobs number. And then student is a rehire, or you can click other and you can type in that free field. Will this work be performed in Idaho? Yes. And then here's where you will enter your funding string. You'll click edit chart fields and then enter in the fund department cost center supplemental project and then hit OK. And then you'll select all hours will be paid to a set funding distribution. And then it will put them here. And again, Dominique talked to us about this earlier. Select this link to add a backup funding source. It's required for work study. So if you select it as a backup funding source for non-work study, again, same kind of situation. It's only informational. It will not be used for payroll in the event that there's an error with the funding sources you selected. Here are the background check questions. So the instructions at the beginning of the candidate hire form, there is a link to pull these up, just in case you're not sure you want to view them prior to getting into the middle of the candidate hire form. You can view them that way. But you will select yes for any question that is applicable, and then that will determine the background checks that are applied. You will select your approvers. So the supervisor and department manager will be populated from what you selected on the previous screen. And then here you can add in any additional approvers that you want. So on the main menu, when we clicked the student hire tile on the left-hand column, there's some other options. Hire new candidate status. That's where you can see where it's at in the approval workflow. or there's approved candidate hire request. If you are a department manager or a supervisor and you know you have student hires coming through and you're not seeing the emails, you can come in here and approve this way without having to wait for the emails for approval. Candidate hire search is another tool that you have available. You can type that in if you have a business manager that's submitting the hire for you and you kind of want to take a look at that, where it's at, you can select candidate hire search, enter the candidate ID here, and then click search, and it will bring up the list of jobs that they have. So I'm going to turn it over to Bailey in the graduate college now.
Thanks, Cece. Could I share my screen, if you don't mind? Okay. So I'm Bailey. I work for the graduate college where I mainly oversee graduate assistantship processing. So if you're ever hiring a graduate assistant and you need assistance, just feel free to reach out to me anytime. So what is a graduate assistantship? There are three main components. We have the work obligation, which is work for the university that is assigned by the supervisor, and the student receives compensation in the form of a salary. This is also often referred to as their stipend. The majority of their job duties of the job description will determine the job title, which must either be graduate teaching assistant, graduate research assistant, or graduate service assistant. The title will have implications for FLSA and IRS requirements. Something important to note for graduate service assistants is that they may be subject to taxation of their tuition benefits. You can read more about that on our website, but it is a good idea to let any student who is going to be hired as a GSA, it's a good idea to let them know prior to hiring them. Tuition and fees. The assistantship includes payment of resident tuition and fees. If there are any non-resident fees, those will be waived. Tuition is required to be paid with a GA-ship, and additional fees are the responsibility of the student. Additional fees include like ID cards, e-textbooks, online fees, things like that. The department may pay for them, but they're not required to do so. And the last component is health insurance. The assistantship covers full payment of the monthly premiums for the graduate assistant health insurance plan. The graduate college automatically adds GAs to the student plan after we approve their hire. And next we have some helpful links and additional information. We have the information for department's webpage. This includes information on creating a GA-ship, hiring steps, current rates, eligibility and job titles, applicable policies, and other important links. We also have GA policy 7170. This policy applies to all graduate assistantships, whether they're full or partial. We have, or for any GA related questions, please direct them to gradassistant@boisestate.edu. You can also contact me directly. And then we have the job aid for hiring a graduate assistant. Note that you need to initiate a background check prior to a new hire. We also have a rehire grad assistant job aid, but for the purpose of this training, we're just going to focus on hiring a new grad assistant because rehiring can get a little complicated. There are some nuances, and there are a couple of different options for rehiring as well. So if you have questions about rehiring, please reach out. So when you're ready to hire GA, you will log into Bronco Hub. You'll navigate to the My Organization tab on the top menu, and then select Hire an Employee. In this first step, you'll select the addresses checkbox. This is required to process the hire. If you miss this step, you'll have to start over. You can leave the communications info and the add direct reports checkboxes blank and then select Continue. Next, you'll complete the when and why section. When is the employee hire date? You'll input the date the employee will start working. The employee hire date should be the first day the employee works. It does not need to coincide with the first day of a pay period. Legal employer is Boise State University. What is the way to hire an employee? Select hire. Why are you hiring an employee? Select new hire, and then select continue. Next, you'll complete the personal details section. You'll enter the person number, which is the employee or student ID. You'll enter the last name, the first name, and the full date of birth. After entering these details, select continue. Next, you'll enter the new hire address information. In the addresses section, enter the country by selecting it from the dropdown or typing the name. The country code for the United States is US. And please note that if you're hiring an international student, Bronco Hub does not accept international addresses. So you can put the address of the university temporarily, and then later the student can go into Bronco Hub and update their address. After entering all the address details, select continue. This next section is the employment details section, and this slide is part 1 of 3. This section is pretty important to the graduate college when we're reviewing for approval because it contains a lot of the information necessary for approval. So please make sure that you complete it carefully and follow the job aid carefully as well. For assignment status, you'll select active with pay. Person type is student. Business unit is IDBSU. For the projected end date, you'll put the contracted end date. Note that the total working date for a graduate assistantship cannot exceed 12 months per policy. After 12 months, the GA needs to be rehired on a new contract. For job, you can begin typing the job name or the job code number for the position, then select it from the drop-down. The following are job codes for graduate assistantships. You might note that graduate research assistant can only be paid salary. A graduate teaching assistant can be paid salary or hourly, and the same with a service assistant. And please do not use job code 49100. If I have it correct, I think this just hires them as a graduate assistant and doesn't specify which type of graduate assistant they are. So for the business title, you will select one of the 3 approved titles, which should match the job code you've chosen. Department, begin typing up the 5-digit HR department ID and select the appropriate department from the dropdown. Reporting establishment is Boise State. Location, this field will auto-populate based on the HR department ID you've selected, and you can leave it as is. Working from home will default to no. You can leave that as is. Assignment category, always select part-time temporary. And next, for full-time or part-time, you will always select part-time. It might get a little confusing when we talk about full GAs and partial GAs, but even a full GA is still a part-time employee. They're not being hired full-time, and they are non-benefit eligible. Hourly paid or salaried, select one of the 2. Working hours, input the working hours per week for this assignment. A partial GA is no more than 10 hours per week, and a full GA is no more than 20 hours per week. For payroll group, select temp salary, and interim assignment, leave that blank. Probation type and PCN number can also be left blank. For the people group, select the icon here to the right, choose student from the drop-down menu, and then the box below that says under 12 months, you can leave that blank and then select OK, and then select continue. Next, you'll enter the costing and funding details information. From the info group, select costing funding details. And then you'll input the following information. Or I'm sorry, you'll select add, and then you'll input the following information. The percentage for each funding string that you're using, if you have split funding, or maybe you have 100% on one single funding string, you can add that information there, and then you'll select OK, and then select continue. In the Assign Manager section, the Manager field defaults to the individual creating the new hire. You can select the Add button to add a new line manager, or you can select the Edit icon to edit the line manager. Both options allow you to search for an active Boise State employee in the name field and select Line Manager as the type. In the name search field, begin typing the individual's first or last name and select them from the drop-down. Select Line Manager in the type field, select OK, and select Continue. Next is the payroll details section. The tax reporting unit is Boise State University. Overtime period for assignment, you can leave that blank. And is a time card required for the assignment? It is only required for hourly employees. A salaried GA does not need a time card. Payroll frequency does need to be added in the payroll details section. And to do so, you select the Add button. More fields will then populate below, and you will select biweekly from the payroll drop-down menu and then select Continue. Next, you'll enter the salary information. Salary basis is either hourly or salary. Hourly rate, you'll input the calculated hourly rate for the graduate assistant using the hourly salary fringe calculator. Please note, the GA must meet the minimum salary requirements as set by the university, and even a salaried GA needs an hourly rate. And another important note, once you select a salary basis, you will see additional fields. Do not select anything from the Choose Components dropdown, and then select Continue. And the final steps, you can enter comments and or add attachments. It's a good idea to check with your department's business manager for any required comments or attachments. The graduate college doesn't require comments or attachments, but you may have a GA offer letter or contract signed by the student, or you might have the hiring request that was submitted to you by the supervisor. Things like that can be added in that section. And then you will submit. Before submitting, you can always go back to each section by selecting Edit and review the details before submitting with this button at the top of the page. And that is all I have for hiring a graduate assistant.
Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, so we're moving on to student adjuncts. They're hired the same way as a regular adjunct via letter of appointment upload, or hire rehire in Bronco Hub Manager Self-Service, or an ad assignment within Bronco Hub. Person type will be student. A regular adjunct, the person type is going to be faculty. And job codes used for student adjuncts are 49151 for the student adjunct hourly. That's where a timesheet will be required. And 49150 student adjunct salaried. No timesheets required. However, if they have another job on campus that is hourly, they will need to be a student adjunct hourly. We cannot combine those. And then I have linked the hire an adjunct faculty job aid. There are instructions within that job aid to notate when to enter a student information. I'm going to hand it over to Rachel for background checks and I-9s.
Hi, everyone. So for background checks, this is required for all employees, students, and volunteers that meet the definition in policy 7005, which is linked here. Primarily, if they're going to be working around students, especially if they may be coming into contact with minors, we absolutely do need a background check on them. So please be sure that you are always filing for that and filling out the proper paperwork to make sure that is on the file. We do have a background check request form, which is linked to, which will link to our servers and notify us that we need to send out a background check for that applicant. So if you don't normally use a Google Doc to track this with our office, please be sure that you are at the very least submitting that background check request form. Rehired employees or volunteers with a break in service that is greater than 12 months are required to complete another background check. So if they've had a lapse in their employment that has exceeded 1 year, we do need them to recomplete a background check. If it's under 1 year, their previous background check will be good as is. And then just keep in mind that any employees or volunteers that are below age 18, if they're minors, we do not do a background check for them. So especially with summer camps right around the corner, if you have any volunteers or employees who are going to be under the age of 18, just know there's no background check required. And then for I-9s, hopefully all of you are somewhat familiar or very familiar with an I-9. This is a federally required form. It's been around since 1986. So if you have worked in the United States in the last 40 years, almost guaranteed, you have encountered this. This is really just used to verify identity of all individuals who are hired in the US. So everyone needs to fill one out, even if they are an international employee, they still are required to fill an I-9 out. This does need to be completed within the first 3 days of employment. So there's 2 sections. Section 1 should really be completed no later than their first day of working. Section 2 needs to be completed by their 3rd day. All employees are required to have a valid I-9 on file, as I said before. And something to keep in mind is we will need them to bring in acceptable documents for that Section 2 portion, which I believe is going to be on the next slide. So as I said, there are 2 sections. Section 1 needs to be completed by the employee on their first day or before their first day of employment. It can be completed remotely. They do not have to come in person to do it. And there is a link on that orange arrow that links you to Section 1 that they can fill out from home or in their office. But Section 2 does need to be filled out in person. So that's actually something that Human Resources will complete on behalf of the employee. They'll need to come in and bring in some acceptable documents. Typically, that would look like a valid passport or passport ID card. In absence of that, we need a combination of a photo ID, so like a driver's license, a military ID card, a CDL, as well as their social security card or their birth certificate. Keep in mind, those do have to be original documents. We cannot accept any photocopies or pictures of them. They do have to be the original valid form in order for us to accept it and verify it. Once all of that has been completed, though, we will fill out what's called a pink slip. This is just proof that the employee has filled out their I-9 properly, that they have one on file. We will give that pink slip to them, and they are instructed to return that to their supervisor. So if you aren't seeing that pink slip, that likely means they have not completed their I-9. We do encourage you to ask for that pink slip as verification and proof of completion. So I kind of touched on this already, but I will just briefly go over it again. The documents that we need are going to be either a List A item, which is good by itself, that primarily is passport or passport ID card. Other than that, we will need a combination of something from List B or from List C. So driver's license, photo ID, as well as a social security card or a birth certificate. Once again, I cannot stress this enough. We cannot accept photocopies pictures, or expired documents. Please, please, please make sure that you are telling that to your student employees. Oftentimes, if they are from out of state, they may not have those documents on hand. Sometimes parents can be a little hesitant to send it to them, but ultimately we have to have those original physical documents. That is not a Boise State rule, that is a federal Department of Homeland Security. So please make sure that you're communicating that to your staff before you send them over. International employees may require some additional paperwork, not necessarily for the I-9, it's more so for making sure that we're doing proper taxation. So please be aware that there will be additional things like an I-94, their visa, their international passport, things like that. We are happy to provide that information in more detail if you reach out to our front desk at hrs@boisestate.edu. And with that, we are at the end of our training. Thank you for those who were able to stick around. I do apologize. We went quite a bit over our training. However, here are some additional training resources, job aids, instructions. I will be sending out the slide deck following this training, which does have all of this information, and all of the links are active. Like I said, this training was recorded as well. So as soon as it's edited and posted, I'll send a follow-up email to the whole group that signed up today to let them know where they can find it, a link to it, so you can come back and review this information at your convenience. With that, thank you so much, everyone.